Welcome to the Breach Show. I'm Martin Lukacs. Doña ZAE is off tonight, but joining me are L. Jones in Halifax and Pam Palmater in Toronto. How you guys doing?
Awesome.
We're good.
So tonight we're taking one for the team by watching the conservative leadership debate, or as we're calling it, the Sinister Six Showdown, and then breaking it down for you, the audience. So here's how the night will go. We'll do 30 minutes of analysis before the debate. And since we couldn't gain access to the media pool that hoards the rights to the broadcast, when the debate starts, we'll encourage you to navigate over to CPAC or CPAC's YouTube channel. But keep this window open so that when the debate is over, come back here and watch us do 30 more minutes of post-debate analysis. We've also got some surprises in store that we'll get into shortly, including conservative-themed bingo and conservative-themed candy. But first, the conservative leadership race has kicked off with 6 candidates who are currently campaigning across the country trying to sign up as many members as possible before June 2nd. Those members will then be able to vote in an election in September. It's the third leadership race in 3 years. Let's kick things off by discussing the 6 candidates. First off is Pierre Poilievre, the 5-time MP from Carleton, Ottawa, who's the shadow finance critic for the Conservatives and widely considered the frontrunner. Pam, L, what are your impressions of him?
Where do we start? Okay, so I've had a problem with him for a very long time because to me, he comes off as adversarial for the sake of it, just for the attention. But in so doing, he actually hurts people. So don't forget, it was he that made those comments after the apology. You remember the apology to residential school survivors and Stephen Harper and other leaders and said that in Parliament. And he was on the radio saying, oh, we're not getting value for money. People should work for their money. You know, as if these Indigenous people who have managed to survive residential schools didn't deserve to be compensated for the horrible atrocities that happened to them and their family members. So this isn't just like a politically incorrect statement. It's just so far away from any sense of humanity, respect for Indigenous peoples. And he's never really changed his tune when it comes to Indigenous peoples all the way along. So not only would he just be a big show like, Trump was, but I think he would be as much of a disaster as Trump was, especially when it comes to Indigenous issues.
I think it was a conservative commentator who called him People's Party Pierre, which is kind of funny. He's doing this, like this is a man, and this actually was one of the attacks made him in the last debate, that has never held a job, like a real job, as they would put it. He's been in politics his entire adult life, but then of course talks about the elites and Indigenous people should get a job and work for their money, while he spent his entire life within a political bubble, but of course poses as a populist. And we've talked about this. If you go back to like our first episode of The Breach, we were talking about this in this like door knocking commercial. And he's very tied up in this like grievance politics of the right. So like every 30 seconds, there's some new grievance politic, usually imported from the US. Like whatever culture war you can start of the moment. Right now it's still like trucker convoy, but 3 months from now it'll be something else. And they're just always writing that and then waiting for like the left or the libs to be triggered, and then using that for the base. So this is very much the kind of politics really imported from Trump as well, that, Poilievre is trying to ride, but at the same time, trying to represent himself as this populist figure, as this like figure for the grassroots. And he has a ton of support, right? Like this is the front runner for the race. So really is managing to capture a lot of, I spent some time watching some of these conservative commentaries from the past debate. And like, he's clearly the favorite of much of the conservative base because he's able to sort of capture this moment of resentment, of culture war. Everything's about the liberals, everything's about Trudeau, the left, whatever grievance you have. And he's really able to bring that out. So this is what makes him popular in these times.
Yeah, I guess to me that speaks to some of his strengths as well and what makes him dangerous. I kind of live by the creed of an old Russian revolutionary who once said, you always have to construe your enemies at their strongest point. Otherwise, you'll be vulnerable to their kind of unacknowledged strength. So he's drawing out huge numbers. Like there were 5,000 out to hear him in Calgary. He's drawing out quite diverse crowds, all ages, lots of racialized people, lots of young people, a lot of non-conservative voters. So he's clearly tapping into a well, not just of resentment, but I think also of people's sense of abandonment and economic insecurity. Does he have any solutions? Of course not. You know, his various hobby horses like Bitcoin or, you know, monetarist policies on inflation are actually just going to further immiserate working class people. But he is, you know, drumming up a lot of support, and he's also quite extreme. Like he's on record saying he wants to replace the entire welfare state with a quote tiny survival stipend. When Harper was in power, he thought Harper was a centrist and you know, too moderate. So all in all, I think this makes him a very dangerous candidate and one to watch out for.
And this is what we saw, right? That particularly Lewis and Baber are attacking him from the right and trying to say that he's actually a false conservative populist. So in the last debate, you see Lewis, for example, saying like, you actually weren't supporting the convoy. You were taking pictures in your own neighborhood, and I was down actually supporting the convoy. So you have this kind of like hipster of, you know, like who was more freedom convoy, who was more anti-vaccine mandate, right? So this is actually the attacks that are being launched on him within the party, that in fact, you weren't here with us, that you're just picking this up for convenience. And where are the actual people that, you know, took this on long before? So Baber's basically like, I lost my job over this, and where were you, right? So we also will see that probably tonight as well, this continued, those attacks coming from the right, trying to paint him as really just an opportunist that has picked this up in the moment and is in fact actually just a career politician and an elite like everybody else.
Exactly.
And one of the dangerous things about him is that he doesn't have to say anything that's even remotely true or remotely accurate or even close to being an analysis. He's literally all about the show. So imagine telling the Bank of Canada that they're financially illiterate. You might not agree with the economists. You might not agree. I mean, but these people are highly super educated. And I'm not saying that I agree with the way the economy works, but to call them financially illiterate, like that's the kind of playground insults that you get that shows more about your own lack of intelligence, your own lack of political acumen, your own lack of, you know, knowledge about anything, to just, you know, hold up a cryptocurrency.
We've
coin
also,
and say, oh yeah, that'll solve everything.
but we've also seen this succeed, right? Like with Trump, nobody knew how to counter it. And I fear the same thing with Polyev, right? Yeah. Like this is about triggering the snowflakes, right? And people get a great deal. They feel empowered by that, right? This like this discourse or this idea that, you know, there's this powerful left, the, as they put it, the Laurentian elite, the left and the liberals, like the three L's that, you know, are running this country. And he very effectively does give people that way to talk back to that and feel empowered by that. But yeah, I mean, it can be hard to counter, right?
Let's move on to Jean Charest because clock's ticking on the debate. Jean Charest, former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party federally, he was a premier of Quebec for nearly a decade. I've been struck how pundits from the right to the left seem to be misdiagnosing him as a moderate or a centrist or a red Tory. For people who live in Quebec, we remember him as an arrogant, corrupt, neoliberal premier who gutted healthcare, who cut the taxes of the rich, who hiked fees for public services. And, you know, when students went on strike in 2012, when he hiked tuition, he unleashed absolute police brutality on them. And he's also kind of known as an environmentalist, but really he passed some market-based policies and for the most part gave fossil fuel companies whatever they wanted. He opened up the northern territories of present-day Quebec, which are Cree, Innu, and Inuit territory, to a frenzy of mining and fossil fuel and clear-cut logging. So this is the Jean Charest we know, not really a moderate, actually quite a savvy, but quite right-wing economic conservative.
Well, yeah, we saw him on stage in that last unofficial debate after Leslyn Lewis went on about how she's pro-life, and Pierre Poilievre is like running from the reporters. He doesn't want them to ask if he's pro-life because he's not, is what she's implying. And then Charest comes in and says, I really appreciate your position on this, Leslyn, you know, and like compliments her for like being pro-life, right? So obviously trying to stake out this position, and goes into this paean to like social conservatives and how important they are to the party. So how he's positioning himself is you can't win without Quebec, right? So he's basically saying, Quebec is opposed to this oil and gas thing, and this is why you're losing, because you can't win Quebec, and I can win Quebec for you. Like, I know how to win Quebec. And that's really been a lot of what he's arguing. So he's obviously facing the attacks, as you said, for like being a liberal in disguise. This is the liberal on the stage. He's supporting Trudeau. He's just another Jean Chrétien, so you're seeing all of this. But what we're seeing is this kind of split between those who are really going hard for like conservative populism, and then the people, especially Aitchison, as we get to him, is being positioned as like the adults in the room that are more moderate and will unify Canada, and we can't get like normal people to vote for us unless we have these people. So he's in that kind of crew where he's positioning himself as a kind of antidote to this like perhaps extreme conservatism. But as you said, it's not, he's no moderate at all.
No, and people should know that the Liberal Party of Quebec is not like the Liberal Party of Canada. It's more akin to the Liberal Party of British Columbia, quite right wing. So it's mostly, as Pam was saying, just another of cheap shots that Pierre Poilievre uses. This man is no liberal.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, Doug Ford calling, Del Duca the, liberal candidate in the Ontario politics, always adding, dash win. So is Del Duca win, always trying to attach it to, that kind of thing. But I think, in Quebec, it's one thing because people are going to be very, very familiar with Jean Charest. But, with the exception of people who follow Quebec politics as closely as they follow, other provincial politics and national politics, I think one of the disadvantages for anyone who's voting in the, conservative leadership, but also Charest's advantage is that people are often quick to forget, especially if you're not from Quebec, if you weren't involved in the day-to-day media, the 8 years of the anti-corruption unit investigations and like all of these things that happened in Quebec during Charest's time. How many people are even going to be talking about that? Poilievre may, throw some things here and there, but people often forget these things, especially outside of Quebec, because that's a very unique situation. A lot of the media is in the French language. Not everybody in Canada speaks French. So, it's hard to see right now whether that'll be an advantage for him, or if his history and all of the critique of how he led in Quebec will actually follow him.
I think that's right, Pam. Let's move on to Leslyn Lewis, who's a socially conservative MP from rural Ontario, and she finished third in the last conservative leadership race. What do you guys make of her?
Yeah, so, Leslyn Lewis is coming hard from the right, and she did actually surprisingly well, right? People wrote her off the last race, and then she ended up coming third, and people were quite impressed with her. And this is, of course, also part of conservatives always want to fight the idea that they're like a white party or a racist party, like a white majority party. So, whenever you have like a conservative that isn't white, there's always this like, yay, but Leslyn Lewis is pro-life, and she's actually coming at the other candidates saying like, you guys aren't actually pro-life, and is very, if you look at some of her proposals, like she wants to start the child benefit tax from, I think, age 12. She's talking about sex selective abortion. So obviously, as the Roe versus Wade leak has happened in the States, there's this now interest in what are the conservatives is going to do in Canada. And Leslyn Lewis has really put that on the table. She's been critiquing Poilievre, as we said, from the right, and basically saying, I was doing all of this stuff and you weren't. You're a latecomer to this, and I've actually been solid on all of these issues. She's one of the people that's been accused of like being a conspiracy theorist within the party, and she's speaking bad about that. So when I went on my tour of conservative commentary, people apparently did not feel she did very well on the last debate. They thought she looked kind of like nervous, but I don't know. It's interesting too, because it is true that people always assume that, the Black community or racialized communities or immigrant communities are sort of natural heritage liberals. The liberals always want that, or like maybe NDP. And there is obviously Black conservatism in this country. And, we saw also that in moderation of the last debate as well. So it's interesting to see what that means, like how we see that growing and the attempt to sort of bring that in. Patrick Brown is another person that's specifically and being critiqued for reaching out to racialized communities as well. So recognizing that, there is probably something on the table if you can reach out to these communities. So Leslyn Lewis is also kind of representing that. I think her slogan's like hope, unity, and I forget what the C is. So it's like this Obama-esque slogan, but obviously like not.
Yeah.
Let's say a bit more about Patrick Brown, who's considered the kind of fourth main contender. He's the mayor of Brampton, the former leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. As you mentioned, his strategy seems to be about courting kind of quietly racialized communities, including Muslim communities, Tamil communities, Nepalese, Chinese. And I've been struck by how he has taken some inadvertently principled positions. He's called for Canada to delist the Tamil Tigers, who are on the terrorist list in Canada. He has criticized Israel's occupation of Palestine, which is quite a rarity for conservatives. He's also donated $100,000 to take legal action against Quebec's Bill 21, which prohibits public sector workers from wearing religious symbols or religious garb. So he's playing a bit of an interesting strategy. And if reports are true, he has a deal with Jean Charest to basically throw support to him once he drops out of the race. So we'll see how that plays out.
I've been joking that, he's most likely to have like a full gospel choir behind him. He's mayor of Brampton. So, in the Black community, we've sort of had him floating around, and this was also part of his strategy in Brampton, right? So if you go look at like the Brampton Twitter and what he's doing, it's a lot of pandering, particularly to like the elite Black classes. So the people that run organizations, the sort of people that are like, the thing they're angriest about from the Ottawa occupation is like slowly being like removed, like that's racism. And, those people are the sort of people he's been really appealing to and working with. And you'll see a lot of like anti-Black racism initiatives and stuff. So he's not in that stream of people that will say like there's no systemic racism in Canada. He's actually been writing that. But which is going to be interesting in relation to the other candidates. He wasn't at the last debate. Some people kind of snarkily said he won by not being there because it was quite a contentious debate, obviously. He was actually out in my way, apparently signing people up. And I don't think anybody saw him or like knows about him or talked about him. But it's an interesting strategy, again, to sort of tap into. There's a lot of social conservatives in, immigrant communities and racialized communities. And but it's interesting that he's trying to balance that with, taking some positions that are generally perhaps seen as like the woke positions, the elite left positions, the cancel culture positions, such as like acknowledging that racism exists in Canada.
Mm-hmm. The thing about him, though, I don't know that he would be able to run away from all of the allegations. He is just literally a cloud of bad stuff, allegations and problems in the Conservative Party and everything else. But at the same time, I don't think anyone thinks for a minute that he has any chance at the actual leadership, that this isn't just some form of strategic positioning, to support someone else or to help, get him out of his own problems. But he's a dogged candidate. I'm surprised he would even let his name stand, because as this continues to go further, the media is just going to glom on to all of the problems that he's had. I really don't think that he has anything to offer. I think he's just there strategically.
I think you're right, Pam. Yeah. So there's two more candidates that we can, I think, expeditiously dispense of. One's Roman Baber, who's a anti-vax Ontario MPP who was kicked out of the provincial party. And there's Scott Aitchison, who's an Ontario MP who seems to be running a campaign to promote his personal brand. I have not been able to discern much else about his agenda.
That's the way to deal with them, though, Martin. They're the two randoms. What do they have to offer? What does anyone know about them? Isn't there a candy about that?
There may be.
Randoms?
The tech people are going to get so mad at me because of rustling, so sorry, guys, but just a quick preview.
Yes.
We may have a.
They're random.
Discovered.
They don't really have anything to offer.
So before we get to our candy, let's quickly show listeners and viewers our conservative theme bingo card.
Oh, we skipped over that. I'll just say very briefly, Baber's also got these like right credentials, because he like gets kicked out of the four government. So he's sort of like the hipster of like COVID, you know, denialism. He's like, I got kicked out for this when y'all were still supporting it, right? And he actually has a lot of support in the grassroots. A lot of people said they were impressed with him in the last debate. They feel like he is capturing stuff about the conservative grassroots. So he certainly, although unfamiliar to a lot of people, it does seem to have spoken to a lot of people. And Aitchison is being called the adult in the room, and is trying. So some people are trying to say, oh, he looks statesman-like. He's the guy being like, come on, guys, stop yelling. Can't we all get along? You know, like the sort of appeal
Dad.
to civility. So yeah, that's as much as
Vote
kind
for
of.
Dad.
Yeah.
All right, so on to our bingo card, which we shared earlier on various channels, but I think we're going to bring up on the screen now.
By the way, this because my normal headphones weren't working, I feel like I'm doing a tribute to Kamala Harris. Like, you know how there's that article about that. I'm trying to hide the wires. It's not working, so I'm just gonna embrace it.
So
This is an awesome card.
Yeah.
For those listening to the podcast, Elle, would you do us the honor of maybe picking out some of the highlights on this bingo square?
Yeah, so you can play bingo with us as we're watching, and you can also argue for if you think that your bingo square is like shady, but you want to sneak it in, feel free to make your arguments to us, like as to why it counts. Of course, we have our free square, which is freedom. How could it not be? Yay, oil. We're out in Alberta for this debate, so we know there's going to be a lot of stroking off pipelines and competing over like who can salivate the most over the oil industry. Coupled with, for example, yay militarism. I'm actually wearing, I'm going to back up a bit. I don't want to show my boobs on camera, but I'm wearing a shirt from World Beyond War that says, I'm already against the next war. Shout out to them.
Nice.
Of course, we have stuff like Tim Hortons.
Oh my gosh.
You know, somebody could dress up like Sidney Crosby working at Tim Hortons in that commercial. That would be good. The endless woke. You can also think about how many uses of woke you might encounter, and what's the most ridiculous use of woke, like calling the military woke. You know, the woke military, and like what else do we have? Hockey, of course. You know, hockey references would count there. Metaphors of hockey. So we'll give it to you if they use some like metaphor of like making a slap shot, or I don't know, however they want to do that. What else do we have? Rights of the unborn. You know, Leslie Lewis, obviously we can expect to perhaps have something to say about that. Low police morale. Initially we had some longer things in these square and we tried to cut them down, but I think the original on this square was like sad stories about low police morale. So you can see, again, this debate, they've said that law and order is one of the topics. So we can imagine the comments about terrorist BLMs and, you know, indigenous terrorist groups while they defend blockading the border and convoys. And like how sad the cops are that they can't racially profile people. So we can pick that. I don't know, Pam, do you want to take some of these?
Rule of law.
Yeah.
Right? Low police morale, rule of law, our indigenous peoples. And then, you know, of course, they're going to try to be the average Canadian. I'm from small town. I'm a taxpayer like you. I support truckers. Something about cows and Alberta beef. I mean, we're going to get the whole usual. But the fun part about it
I thought Alberta beef was like the beef with Alberta, like Alberta's beef with Canada.
No, it was prime Albertan beef.
All this time, I thought that the Alberta beef square was like about the Western separation stuff. So you get it for both.
Yes, you do.
Either
You do.
one.
If they talk about an actual cow, or if it's about like, you know, pandering to people in Alberta about how they don't want to be part of Canada anymore because of the libs or whatever.
So we're sharing the link to this bingo in the YouTube chat. Play along with us during the debate. The first 3 people who call a bingo will send you a prize, a Breach tote bag. I can show you. Classy Breach tote bag. The way you can claim your prize is by tweeting a screenshot of your winning bingo card, or emailing it to us at info@breachmedia.ca, and we'll throw that info in the YouTube chat. Lastly, we have about 3-4 minutes before the debate starts. So I didn't want to end things without us going through the substances that will be getting us through the debate tonight. What do we have in store, guys?
All right. Well, first of all, I have to lean to the side. So you see my beautiful back. The tech people hate me right now for moving around. Sorry, guys. And touching things. They're like, we can hear you. But I have my special background. It is a map of the Ottawa occupation. It's got a gas station. We see the smokestacks. So just, you can vibe with me on that. We're accepting gas. But we chose conservative themed candies for tonight. So very quickly, I have a Mirage bar because, they're not offering us anything other than Mirage. We have Zero on the same theme. What?
Zero.
Not zero emissions. What are you going to get out of this week? Zero. I'm I think Pam did this one too, but Cry Babies.
Yes.
Cancel culture, boo. We saw the randoms, our tribute to who the hell are these other people in the debate?
These guys.
I'm trying to not rustle. Warheads.
Oh,
we can
Nice,
expect,
very appropriate.
we can expect some warmongering tonight, competing over Ukraine, who's a stooge of Putin. Airheads, of course. Kind of went overboard. But now I'm gonna get to some of the really good ones. Whereas, oh no, I lost my candy. I lost my
candy.
Oh, here, this guy. This is Bullet Bill,
Oh, wow.
and he comes with little blue bullets.
Pro guns.
Pro guns.
Yeah.
Pro
go
guns.
conservative.
So we can throw these at the screen every time they make a point. And I have dinosaurs.
Because they're
Ooh.
dinosaurs.
Because they're dinosaurs.
Yeah. They're old school.
Pam, what about you? What do
And
you
one
have,
more,
Pam?
sorry.
Oh.
One more. The coup de grace.
Oh, yes. Toxic waste.
Toxic waste.
Ah, lovely.
Okay, well, my candy is actually being delivered in a conservative style transport truck. Let me get it for you.
We need to sing the trucker song.
Oh my God, you guys went all out.
As you can see,
I feel like I should be singing the Rat Ranch song.
mandate freedom. Oh no, Trudeau. We've got, of course, flags that have nothing to do with Canada. But, and you can see it's deadhead trucks. So they didn't deliver any supplies when we needed them during the pandemic. Oh, but on this side, because we're talking about candy, it is delivering my conservative candy.
Holy
And I have
smokes.
a whole bunch, in addition to it being fake news. We've got crybabies here. We've got trash candy.
Wow.
We've got mining for gold. We've got money here. We've got, let's see, cigarettes, cryptocurrency right
Those are
here.
candy cigarettes?
Yes, candy cigarettes.
Nicely done.
Cryptocurrency, worms. And then over here, I'll take them out later, but basically they're teeth. When politicians lie through their teeth and then their teeth fall out. So this is just some of the stuff that and I also have over here, you can't really see it, it's sour grapes.
Ooh.
I need to sing the 16 Cowboys song to you. You're now a trucker.
Wow, you guys have truly outdone yourselves.
Yes.
You have put me to shame. My offering is a chocolate bar called Flake.
That's awesome, Martin.
So I'm getting word that the debate has now started. So we're going to hit pause and encourage people to visit cpac.ca or the CPAC YouTube channel to watch the debate for the next 2 hours. And then when that's over, come back here for 30 minutes of post-debate analysis.
And don't forget your cards.
Oh, I
And
also
don't forget
got
your
my
bingo
freedom
card.
candy. I will also be eating this free to be candy.
Oh,
That
yes.
looks hideous. So.
Welcome back, everybody. We're just waiting for Pam and Al to join us. It's possible they've all sugar crashed from the mountain of sugar that they consumed. Pam and Al, can you hear me now?
Oh
Here
my
we are.
goodness, I was
We were
here the
trapped.
whole time.
We were trapped backstage.
I know.
Welcome back, guys.
Oh, we escaped the backstage.
So you guys, it's not the sugar, eh? It was just some technical difficulties.
I feel like I should go lick this gas station after all of it.
Oh my God.
Gas! Oil and gas! I feel like I should just suck that into my mouth.
So
Or perhaps really useless questions. Do you drink coffee or tea? Do you
Yeah.
prefer pizza or burgers?
I gotta do this little bit, Martin.
Oh
but
my
I can use my
gosh.
candy to make a sentence. Like, that debate was a toxic waste of time. They offered 0 in terms of policy and mostly random answers to airheaded questions. We did hear a lot about freedom.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Dinosaurs on stage only propose more warheads and pipelines. There you go. See how the candy works? There you go.
Here's my candy. It's toilet candy. Here's a lot of what I heard.
It did feel a little bit like a blind date night with a Tory.
Oh,
You know, like
so gross.
like what do you like on Netflix? Do you love
I know.
music? What's your
My
favorite food?
No.
My favorite was like when they're like, "Do you read?" And which one was like, "Reading is for nerds." Was that Patrick Brown that was like, "Oh, I don't even like read when I'm campaigning."
And they
then
couldn't even name a book.
yeah, I like Charade. I'm reading a book on Russia.
Yeah. What's the title?
What's the title? I don't know.
And Roman Baber named David and Goliath, which last I checked is definitely not a book. I think it's from the Bible.
Oh, you elitists. You elitists expecting people to read words.
Mm.
You read words when you can just go stand by a gas pump and spray it in your face.
I love how they wasted all of their panels on. I love the truckers. I stood up for the truckers. No, you didn't. I did. I walked. No, I got kicked out. No, you did. No, I love the truckers. I love the truckers and freedom, not you guys. Okay? And to waste all of your time on that. Like, hello, there are major issues in Canada, and we talked about like reading books.
Oh no, Pam, your truck just destroyed your microphone.
What?
You jammed. Your truck occupied your microphone.
No, because I have fluff. It can't.
Al, what did you make of their political heroes?
Yeah, I mean, that was hilarious because, I mean, first of all, they're like, no Winston Churchill, forcing everyone to go to the next on the list, which was Nelson Mandela. So we had 2 Nelson Mandelas. And it's really funny because then later on, of course, and they asked the question about like illegal protests, and they all fall over themselves to, of course, as usual, what about the left? What was it? Axe-wielding terrorists out in BC? That's you, Pam. But it's like, aren't you aware of Mkondo Sizwe? You know, like, you know that, the ANC also had a military wing that destroyed property and waged what they would call like a terrorist war, you know what I mean? Which they were calling at the time. So it's just funny to watch these conservatives now be like, oh, we love Nelson Mandela. He was colorblind. He loved all people.
I know.
We hate actual protesters, like indigenous protesters. Like, I don't think you understand Mandela.
And the axe wielding like psycho. I was like, oh, you mean the RCMP who used an axe to chop into the Wet'suwet'en house? Oh, that's who. Oh, no. I don't know who they're talking about. I don't know. It's I really didn't. I mean, it was all about freedom. It was all about who was against mandates the most. Whether or not Pierre Poilievre is for women's choice to choose an abortion or not. I mean, they just wasted so much time trying to get at him. Climate change? Nah. Indigenous peoples and reconciliation? Nah. Pipelines, mining, and some war and military. I think that was what we got.
The solution for everything was like just spray some gas on it,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Indigenous people, we just need pipelines so they can have jobs, you know? Like the North, they need more pipelines. That was hilarious because then they're like, the ice is melting. And then after 2 hours of like literally just sucking off pipelines, then they're like, oh yeah, it's a security threat to Canada if the ice melts in the North. It's like, why is it melting? But of course, the solution was more military bases. Noble.
I love how the 6 candidates plus the moderator can mention the North so many times and not actually say anything about Inuit people, or it's just military base. And they said the word North a lot, but they didn't actually talk about any. Do you know what the issues are in the North? Do you know anything that's happening on the ground? Do you know what they've asked for? No, they don't know anything about the North. They couldn't even get the word Indigenous peoples out of their mouths. I mean, Leslin talked about murdered and missing Indigenous women crisis on reserves. Like, she has no idea that the largest number of predators that are kidnapping, sexually exploiting, and murdering Indigenous women is actually off reserve in city centers by non-Indigenous peoples. And she literally had no idea what she was talking about. I mean, who uses the word Aboriginal anymore? None of them really had anything to say about Indigenous peoples except, what was his name? Bobber. He's not going to stand for it. He's going to just natural resources are going ahead, pipelines are going ahead, there will be no blockades, there will be no resistance, we're going to meet you halfway, but we're going to get them done. It was just, wow. It was more than Law and Order. It was almost like, it was very aggressive, almost like, we're going to war and we will build these pipelines. It was really kind of frightening.
And then there was that, I think it's Brown and Lewis at the end, where Brown says, some candidates on the stage have been like rude about Indigenous people. So you'll never get a pipeline built if you're not nice to Indigenous people. So this is like the purpose of reconciliation. Like, we only apologize to residential schools so we could run a pipeline through their territory.
Yeah, exactly.
And then she's like, I know you don't mean me. I love Indigenous.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Pam, what did you make of their answers to whether they would implement the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
Well, it should have been a very clear yes or no. Most of them were like, remember the question is about the calls to action under the Truth and Reconciliation Commission dealing with residential schools and all of the aftermath that's continued into the present. And their response is, most of them couldn't even answer straight away. They had to be asked a second time. And their answers are, well, we need a relationship so we can build pipelines. And I'm like, oh, did you even hear the question? It's called reconciliation. What are you going to do about implementing the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples? What are you going to do about addressing murdered and missing, about kids in foster care, about housing, about education? I mean, literally about all of the issues that Canada created this crisis. No, they couldn't be bothered to talk about that. They wanted just to talk about relationships so we could build pipelines. Not a good look on any of them.
In a way, it sort of told on so many of these processes too, because then they're like, 94, like, who takes that seriously? It's like 94. Can we do like 4?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, and considering that, no one even mentioned the National Inquiry into Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women and Girls, and that there's 231 or 237 recommendations. Like, hello, are we going to deal with this? Never mind RCAP, Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, 440 recommendations. They can't even be bothered to do the 94 recommendations.
There's an old Norm Macdonald joke, Name 2, which is like it's his idea of a game show where they'd be like, this group got inducted into like the Music Hall of Fame with all their hit songs, Name 2. So I feel like they should have said Name 2 recommendations.
Yeah, just name one.
Name one.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys, if they couldn't name a book, they're definitely not going to be able to name a recommendation from the TRC.
Exactly. So
that's
true.
asking way too much. What about the abortion question? I found that interesting that all but one of the candidates, Leslin Lewis, said they would not restrict abortion. I mean, I don't really believe them.
Poilievre.
Especially Poilievre, highly deflective in his question, which Charest kind of like attacked him on. And
also, we had Lewis repeating this myth. So, in fact, yes, it is legal in Canada to have abortions up to like 9 months if there is a problem, right? So there are no cases in Canada where somebody who's like 9 months into term with a perfectly healthy pregnancy and a healthy fetus is getting an abortion. Obviously, the legality is if it obviously turns out that the baby is not viable, right? So these kind of myths are what we have going on this stage. So she's like, it's legal in Canada to abort a baby at 9 months. Like, so theoretically, but no.
Ridiculous. It was important that they were all clear about women's choice. They wouldn't, prohibit it. she was very, pro-choice, but Polyev just kept trying to like worm around. And didn't we have like gummy worms or something? A very appropriate candy for Pierre Polyev, because they kept coming back to him and kept asking him, and he's like, I wouldn't introduce legislation. Yes, I'm about freedom. And it's like, wait a second, but freedom for who? And so based on his answers, he could allow someone in his party to introduce legislation. Easy peasy. He could let the Senate do it. He could let a private member's bill do it, because he didn't do it. And he believes in freedom. He never said, I believe in a woman's choice to have an abortion and we're going to protect that. So he managed to dance around all of those questions very directly. I mean, it just made him look very gummy wormy.
And did we really hear that Patrick Brown, are we talking about MIA, or is there like some other MIA that we don't know about?
No, I think it's the MIA, the Tamil like rapper who calls for no borders. My hunch is he was pandering to the Tamil community on that one, like as part of this strategy to court the vote of racialized communities. Unless there's some MIA I don't know about.
Is there some like country metal band MIA that has a anthem to the truckers that we just don't know about? Because I'm like, wow, that was out of line. The interesting thing was the moderation too, right? So I actually have to understand. So before, I saw a lot of conservatives complaining about the choice of moderator because they said that he's most famous for asking Trudeau on the plane what brand of shampoo do you use, and they're like, you couldn't find like a conservative from Alberta. And then given that we got all these questions like, what album are you currently listening to? What are you binge watching on the Netflix? You're like, oh, I get it. I guess that's why they're mad about the shampoo question. I have to agree with them.
My guess is they saw what happened at the last debate where they were just ripping each other apart, and they're endeavoring to endear like these conservatives to Canadians, because the reputation that Harper got as a kind of like cold, like humanless like individual, and I think they are going out of their way now to be like, look, they're nice guys, they're friendly, they read, kind of. So I think that's part of the shtick that they were engaging in, especially after last Friday's debate.
I think out of the whole debate, the people who said the very least about like substantive stuff was like the worst was probably Leslin. And then Aitchison, because they would just talk about like generic stuff. Both of them never used up their whole time. They would just say like a couple of generic statements, like about she was trying to talk about electric cars, and you have to think about the whole product and people in Africa in cobalt mining. And I'm like, what are you trying to say? You haven't really said anything. You haven't talked about your policy, what you would do. And I think that was what was lacking through most of this is instead of saying what Trudeau's doing bad, we know you guys don't like Trudeau.
But it was like Voldemort. Like you couldn't actually say Trudeau. It was like he will not behave.
Yeah. So it was weird to not actually have any stuff. Like, here's what, we don't like. Okay, well, tell us what you will do. You say you're going to unite people. Okay, how are you going to do that? What is your actual plan?
It's going to be the pipeline of unity, and we can all hold hands.
Oh my gosh. They all seem to agree on the pipeline of unity and the oil and gas and the mining of unity.
You can go swimming in the gas and oil.
And that it's good for the planet. That in fact, this will just help clean up the planet.
Well,
I think it was Leslyn Lewis who said it's short-sighted not to invest in pipelines, and I was assuming she's going to say it's short-sighted not to start the beginnings of a green shift. There weren't any even like green capitalist solutions on the table like we're getting from the Liberal Party. It was quite surreal and felt like a kind of like regression from the Conservative Party. Whereas in past elections, we've seen at least leaders like O'Toole at least make some sounds towards being like interested in combating climate change. But now we just got full blanket denialism.
And this is, of course, because they're also in Alberta, so they're really trying to pander.
It's true. There's a hometown advantage, yes.
To the oil and gas there. But yeah, literally, virtually every question, of course, then they're talking about we need to actually consume more Canadian oil because of evil China and Russia. And like world peace will be caused by our clean, edible oil that you can bathe in and give to your baby.
Oil.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, clean oil. And then we'll just replace Russia. And then we'll use all of that money to make the environment great and build a massive military so that we cannot fight Russia, but we're ready to fight Russia because we don't want them to use their oil. I mean, everything was just so focused on how can you make money off of potential wars, ongoing wars, blockades even, oil and gas, and it's all tied to oil and gas. They have literally no vision for Canada that can even imagine that we're in a climate change crisis, that can even imagine that there are massive human rights violations happening in this country, that can even imagine that there's people who actually need social supports, like urgent social supports, housing and healthcare and all of it. Just
I'm also
Patrick Brown kind of try to allude. So he's always trying to ride this line. So he would, we got some mentions that I think Baber did this as well at one point where they'll sort of say addictions and mental health and housing, but then it all kind of just falls apart. I was going to say that I did think that, far be it for me to say this, but I did think the most effective point in the debate was when Poilievre was going at Charest's record. If there was a line of the night, I do think it was when he was like, well, you said this and then you didn't do it. You said this and then we all remember your record and now can that was actually quite effective. So I was like, okay, we actually got some discussion at least of what people's records are, what their policy are. So I will give that to Poilievre, right? But then, as you pointed out, Martin, so much of what he's saying is also so untruthful or couched in misrepresentations as well, right?
Well, he was correct about one thing he pointed out about Jean Charest, which is that Jean Charest did vote to recriminalize abortion under Mulroney. And I was struck that, I think Judy Rebick pointed this out on Twitter, that it was politically interesting that Poilievre would attack Charest from the left on that question, which is, he's doing an interesting kind of dance, trying to, not scare away social conservatives, but also attacking Jean Charest for actually recriminalizing abortion. So that was an interesting point to me. The other thing that I was struck by in the whole debate was that there's this notion that Trudeau is has this closet socialist agenda to shut down the oil sands. And I would love to live in the world that conservatives think we live in. But we have a liberal government that, far from shutting down the tar sands, just today the cabinet announced another $10 billion loan guarantee for the TMX pipeline. So it's absolute phantom boxing, completely illusory phantom boxing with the Liberal Party that I find quite remarkable.
And then all couched in this rhetoric of division while they say things like, the diabolical evil left. I think was a literal quote from Poilievre at one point. Poilievre. Now I'm being Leslie Lewis. She called him Poliver.
Poliver.
Literally we have these what was it? I think it's Baber that talks about he was watching a movie on Trotsky or something on YouTube, and this taught him
Poilievre.
about...
That was Poilievre.
Okay. Yeah, that taught him about the demonic, diabolical, evil left, and they're Canada's so divided. These politicians keep using divisive rhetoric. Well, the whole night is, of course, directed at Trudeau, directed at the left, axe-wielding terrorists out in Wet'suwet'en. Which is, of course, the usual projection, right? That racism isn't caused by, the only problem is talking about it. Division is caused by Indigenous people talking about, wanting justice for residential schools. Division is caused by the left for daring to talk about things like wanting housing options or, but we kept hearing that our democracy is literally threatened by, whatever it is, the libs. We're literally threatening democracy and Canada on the world stage, which is actually quite alarming, right? Because they keep coming back to that. And when they're asked what's the most serious issue facing Canada today, they all say that we're so divided, to the point where people are saying, this actually threatens our national security. And we don't think that that's terrifying rhetoric, right? That, so if these internal visions threaten us democratically on the world stage, then surely to survive, you would have to suppress all those factions that threaten Canada, but also we're for freedom, right?
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing about like listening to this. If you look at it like on a big picture, macro level, they conflicted everything they said. They contradicted everything they said. Like it doesn't matter what issue they were on. They're talking about freedom and non-censorship and freedom to do whatever you want, but I won't put up with protests and blockades. We won't allow that to happen. It's like, oh, wait a second. Isn't that about freedom? Like on every single aspect, they contradicted themselves. And ultimately to kind of portray, like the question was asked, what is the most significant issue facing Canada? I mean, if that was me, I would say, oh my gosh, we've got climate change and everything that's happening with climate change. We've got murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, everything that's happening on the Indigenous file. We've got, global issues. We've got affordability issues. And they're stuck on like censorship and cancel culture. And I'm going to protect your freedoms. It sounds so very American, I'm going to protect the Constitution. And I was like, really? That's what you consider the most urgent issue facing Canada right now? We're still in a pandemic. Is this pandemic right there at all? No, it's just like, oh, and the worst was it Baber or Babber or Bobble, whatever his name is.
Bobble.
He was, they were talking about, he was just like ranting about how he was opposed to the mandate and everything. And that it was this mandate of, masks and closing things down, that was the cause of surgeries being delayed, of screenings being delayed. I mean, that couldn't be further from the truth. It was actually the pandemic and all of the people that were being sick and hospitalized and in ICUs and hospitals stretched to the very limit. That's why elective surgeries had to be delayed. It had nothing to do with masks. It was people not wearing masks, not getting vaccinations that caused that. So it's like a complete, they live in another world, I think.
It was interesting that we didn't hear seniors. So we didn't hear anything about that, even though older people vote. And we usually hear quite a lot about things like seniors. We didn't really hear anything on healthcare at all, other than them argue, literally like out vaccine mandating themselves. But nobody actually talked about healthcare. The immigration answer was interesting because they all actually, in kind of contrast to the Harper conservatives, somewhat came out for immigration as long as you're hardworking and going to keep order and integrate, as Sheree said. Yep. But then later on, of course, sorry, I just hit the microphone and moved something. But then they did tell us about guns or coming across the border and like illegal people. So we got that. And there was a moment where Patrick Brown, I think it is, he said bail reform. And I'm like, oh, he wants bail reform. But it was bail reform to like stop repeat habitual criminals, So I'm like, oh. So, but we didn't hear much on justice other than that sort of section where they all tried to law and order, outlaw and order each other. I'm going to be tough on criminals. We need to restore the Harper era. But surprisingly little on justice given, how much of a hot issue that has been. So perhaps it was a debate more notable for what we didn't hear than what we did hear, which was like 10 minutes on cryptocurrency and an argument about that. Yeah, endless like tie-ins to pipelines. Like they literally could have just like licked oil off the ground and not much else. Like there was references to housing, but nobody really talked about an affordable housing plan. And it was a quite substanceless debate that's returning to the same talking points over and over and over again. So.
Even if the question wasn't that. It's like, oh, what's your vision for Canada? No carbon tax. Will you implement the calls to justice? No carbon tax. I mean, how many times did Leslin say that over and over and over again? I was like, did you come here with even a platform at all? And they just, no matter what the question was, somehow they found to get in there, no carbon tax. And if they think that that's like the primary concern of Canadians, like they're so disconnected.
I was happy to see at the very least the entire conservative stage ganging up on Pierre Poilievre on the question of Bitcoin. And just to shout out, Paris Marx did a fantastic piece basically breaking down how Bitcoin is a perfect fruit of far right-wing ideology that will basically act as a Ponzi scheme to enrich the already rich and immiserate the poorer people who are buying into the kind of propaganda around Bitcoin. So that was nice to see that it didn't gain greater legitimacy. The freedom question to me is very interesting. Like Polyev clearly repeated it so many times, like he was trying to cast a spell, like an incantation. But I think that like they're clearly on to something, because the word freedom, the concept of freedom, is such a potent word that taps into like, the deepest human aspirations. But the right wing has absolutely monopolized and claimed the language. And I think when they're speaking about it, it's clearly, as you point out, Pam, so incoherent, because what they mean by it is corporations being unconstrained by any regulations, or individuals being unconstrained by any public health measures. It means people, acting without any accountability for abuse or violence. And I think what this says is the left really needs to take back that freedom, but we need to do a much better job of defining what positive freedoms stand for. So freedom from hunger, freedom from lack of affordable housing, freedom from racist and sexist violence, freedom from the endless toil of low-wage, precarious work, freedom to not have our fates determined by billionaires who are despoiling the planet. So I think until we take back the term freedom, like, too many people will continue believing that the right's bogus solutions are what constitute freedom. That was, for me, one of the takeaways from this debate, and generally the kind of leadership race so far.
And I thought, there's like one thing, I know we're probably almost out of time, but at the end of the day, if you look at it again, like on a big level, you've got Polyev, who wants to like fire the head of the Bank of Canada and just everyone buy cryptocurrency, even though I didn't tell you to buy it, even though it's all over Twitter, I did or I didn't. But you've got Charest, who, whether you support his long-term politics or not, he's like, listen, we need investment. We need certainty. Investors are only going to invest if there's certainty. And you can't have certainty if we have uncertainty in our government. If you start trashing Canada's institutions, other countries are going to say we're in disarray. Effectively, obviously, I'm just summarizing. But there's a real core difference between someone who's actually governed, well or not, and this like showboat who's just saying things to try to get elected, like to try to get a following, who doesn't have a real concept of what it means to truly govern, and he's lacking experience. And I think that showed, even though he had that like fiery moment where he was able to say, oh, you did this and this and this and this. I think at the end of the day, it really shows who could potentially be a governor and who has like no skill at all.
I think you're right, Pam. I think just to like put my pundit hat on, like, and to view it sheerly in terms of like the horse race, I do think that gets to the heart of the question about this leadership race. That can Polyev actually beat back that narrative that actually Charest is the one who actually has a chance to win and can govern? And did Charest kind of survive the attacks that actually he's like a liberal in disguise? And my hunch is after this debate, Charest came out stronger.
Yeah.
I think, though, we can't underestimate. I mean, one of the problems we often have is that we think like nuance and complex ideas. But, I mean, I think the right is very good at hitting media. Like they're very good at, they know what their base wants. They're very good at speaking to that. So I think we also shouldn't assume that this is a kind of failure. They know that it's like these very simple pipeline jobs, like freedom. Trudeau is a diabolical, evil socialist. Like, you just keep it simple, and then those are narratives that people can buy into, as opposed to, and even the format is set up, it's always 30 seconds, 45 seconds, so you don't really get time for any kind of nuance. So it's just spitting out your talking point and keep it moving. And the debate is set up that way. So you're not getting a 5-minute answer or long discussion on foreign policy. Everything is set up to be about personalities. Pick, like, it's literally like World Star Hip Hop of debates. Like, pick who you want to go at, and then like, Polyev crushes Charest. Like, it's like literally set up for like YouTube commentary, right? Like, so I think perhaps they're onto something with that people want, narratives that it's just really, really simple and, has these kind of resonances, as opposed to, like long policy wonk conversations. But as a result, it was really a format that offered nothing. I did think it was funny when they're like, if you boo or chair, like, your candidate loses time. That was funny.
And Polyev lost 10 seconds. I think for me, that was the highlight of tonight.
Guys, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Thanks to our analysts, Elle and Pam. As always, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. Or if you're listening to the podcast version, please remember to like, rate, and share. And if you'd like to help sustain the work of The Breach, please consider becoming a member at breachmedia.ca. I'm Martin Lukacs, signing off for The Breach Show. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye. I have to go brush my teeth.
I know. Conservative candy. Ew.